In 1587, more than 100 men, women, and children crossed the Atlantic with a dream. They were not soldiers marching into battle. They were families, settlers, people who believed they were building the beginning of a new English world across the ocean. But 3 years later, when help finally returned, the colony was gone. There were no bodies, no battlefield, no desperate message carved into the walls. Only one word was left behind: Croatoan. Carved into wood, it was the last trace of a settlement that disappeared before America, as we know it, even existed. For centuries, people have asked the same question: what happened to the Lost Colony of Roanoke? Some believe the settlers died. Others believe they were attacked. Some say they moved inland, and one theory suggests they were never truly lost at all. Maybe they left a message. Maybe history simply failed to follow it. This is not just a story about a vanished colony. It is a story about fear, survival, ambition, and the thin line between history and legend. This is the story of Roanoke, the colony that vanished without a trace. To understand Roanoke, we have to begin with a dream. In the late 16th century, England was looking west. Spain had already built a vast empire across the Americas. Spanish ships carried silver, gold, and power across the Atlantic. For England, the New World was not only a place of opportunity, it was a battlefield of influence. Sir Walter Raleigh, an English courtier and explorer, received permission to establish a colony in North America. The plan was ambitious. A permanent English settlement could give England a foothold in the New World. It could support future voyages. It could challenge Spanish power. It could open routes for trade, wealth, and expansion. But maps were incomplete. Supplies were limited. The Atlantic was dangerous, and the land across the ocean was not empty. It was already home to native peoples, with their own communities, alliances, rivalries, and ways of life. Before the famous colony of 1587, there had already been an English attempt at Roanoke. In 1585, an earlier group arrived on Roanoke Island. That settlement was mostly military, made up of men. It struggled with supply problems, hunger, and worsening relations with local native communities. After less than a year, the men left. The first attempt had failed, but England did not abandon the dream. In 1587, another expedition was sent across the ocean. This time the plan was different. This was not supposed to be only a military outpost. This was supposed to be a true colony. Men came, women came, children came, families came. They were not only exploring the New World, they were trying to live there. The group was led by John White. White was not simply a governor, he was also an artist and mapmaker. During earlier voyages, he had created some of the most important visual records of the region and its native communities. He had seen the landscape before. He understood some of its promise, but he also understood its dangers. The settlers who sailed with him in 1587 expected to establish themselves farther north, near the Chesapeake Bay. That location was considered more promising, but the voyage did not go as planned. Instead of being taken to the Chesapeake, the colonists ended up back at Roanoke Island. It was not where they intended to build their future, but it was where they were left. And from the beginning, that decision placed the colony in a dangerous position. Roanoke Island was not a blank piece of land waiting to be claimed. It was part of a living world. Native communities in the region understood the land, the seasons, the waterways, and the dangers far better than the English newcomers. For the colonists, survival depended on food, cooperation, timing, and trust. They needed crops, they needed shelter, they needed supplies from England, and they needed peaceful relations with the people who already lived nearby. But trust was fragile. The earlier English presence had already caused conflict. Some local groups were cautious, others were hostile. A few remained friendly. The new settlers had arrived in a place where memory mattered, and not every memory of the English was good. Still, life began. Small houses were built, defenses were prepared. Families tried to settle into a strange and difficult place. Then, on August 18, 1587, a child was born. Her name was Virginia Dare. She was the granddaughter of John White, and she became the first English child born to English parents in North America. For the colonists, her birth must have felt like a sign, a beginning, a symbol that this place could become home. But Virginia Dare would also become part of the mystery, because when the colony disappeared, she disappeared with it. A newborn child, a young mother, a fragile settlement, and more than 100 people would all become shadows in one of history's oldest American mysteries. Within weeks, the colony faced a hard reality. They needed more supplies, they needed stronger support from England. The settlement was vulnerable, and the colonists knew it. So they asked John White to return across the Atlantic and bring back help. White did not want to go. His family was there, his daughter was there, his newborn granddaughter was there. Leaving them behind meant trusting the sea, the ships, the weather, the politics of England, and the survival of the colony itself. But the settlers insisted. They needed help. So John White sailed back to England. He expected to return quickly, but history had other plans. When White reached England, the country was preparing for war. The Spanish Armada was approaching. England needed ships. The government restricted voyages. Private vessels were pulled into military service. The crisis between England and Spain delayed almost everything. White tried to get back to Roanoke, but the Atlantic was no simple road. A voyage required ships' money, permission, sailors, supplies, and weather. Every delay mattered. Weeks became months, months became years. And across the ocean on a small island off the coast of what is now North Carolina, more than 100 colonists waited. They waited for food, they waited for help, they waited for ships that did not come. And the longer they waited, the more dangerous their situation became. Imagine the colony during that time. No modern communication, no certainty, no way to know whether England had forgotten them, no way to know whether John White was alive, no way to know whether ships would ever appear on the horizon. The settlers had to make decisions. Stay and hope, move and survive, ask nearby native communities for help, break into smaller groups, try to reach another location. Every option carried risk. A settlement can vanish suddenly, but it can also disappear slowly, one difficult choice at a time. And by the time John White finally returned, 3 years had passed. In 1590, John White came back to Roanoke. He was no longer returning to a young colony he had left behind for a short supply mission. He was returning to a place that had been alone for 3 years. Among the people he hoped to find were his daughter, Eleanor, and his granddaughter, Virginia Dare. But as the ships neared the island, the expedition faced bad weather and danger. Even before they reached the settlement, the journey was troubled. Men were lost. The coastline was hazardous. The outer banks could be unforgiving, but White pressed on. He needed to know what had happened. He needed to find his people. And when he finally reached the settlement, he found silence. The colony was empty. The houses were gone or dismantled. The settlement did not look like a place destroyed in a sudden massacre. There were no bodies, no obvious battlefield, no sign that the colonists had been slaughtered where they stood. But they were not there. The people were gone. Their homes had been taken apart. Their belongings were missing or scattered, and the silence must have been unbearable. For John White, this was not only a political failure or an expedition gone wrong. This was personal. His family had been here, his daughter, his granddaughter, the first English child born in the New World. And now, the only thing left was absence. Then White found the clue. On a tree, there were 3 letters carved into the wood, CRO. Nearby, on a post or part of the defensive structure, a longer word had been carved, Croatoan. It looked mysterious. To later generations, it would become almost supernatural. A strange word left behind by vanished people, but to John White, it may not have been terrifying at all. Before he left the colony in 1587, the settlers had reportedly agreed on a signal. If they had to leave, they would carve the name of the place where they had gone. And if they were forced to leave because of danger or attack, they would add a cross. White found no cross. That mattered. The message may not have meant panic. It may have meant direction. Croatoan was not just a word. It referred to a native community and an island south of Roanoke. Today, that place is associated with Hatteras Island. To White, the carved word may have suggested that the colonists had moved there, and that was not an unreasonable possibility. The Croatoan people had been among the native groups with friendlier connections to the English. If the settlers were starving, isolated, or afraid, moving toward people who might help them would have made sense. The houses being dismantled also suggested planning. People fleeing in terror do not carefully take apart their homes, but people relocating might. They would carry tools, they would carry usable materials, they would take what they could, and they would leave a message behind for anyone who came looking. White wanted to search for them. He wanted to go to Croatoan, but once again, weather and circumstance interfered. A storm threatened the ships. The expedition could not continue the search. Instead of sailing south to follow the clue, White was forced to leave. He never found the colonists. He never found his daughter. He never found Virginia Dare. The message was there. The possible direction was there. But the search ended before it truly began. And because the search ended, the mystery survived. The Lost Colony became a story with a beginning, a disappearance, and no final page. History was left with a clue, but not enough proof to close the case. Over the centuries, many theories have tried to explain what happened. The darkest theory is that the colonists were killed. They may have been attacked by hostile native groups. They may have died in conflict. They may have been unable to defend themselves in a place where they were outnumbered, undersupplied, and isolated. But the evidence for a massacre at the settlement is weak. When White returned, he did not describe bodies. He did not describe a battlefield. He did not find a clear sign that the colony had been destroyed by violence at that location. That does not prove violence never happened, but it makes a simple massacre story less convincing. The colony was gone, but the scene did not clearly look like sudden destruction. Another theory is that the settlers starved. This is possible. They were far from England. They depended on supply ships that did not arrive. They were living in an unfamiliar environment. If crops failed, if relations with native communities worsened, or if disease spread, the settlement could have collapsed. But starvation alone does not explain the carved message. It does not explain the dismantled houses. It does not explain why there were no clear remains at the settlement. A starving colony might scatter. It might seek help. It might move. And if that happened, the story becomes less about sudden death and more about desperate survival. Not a colony that vanished in one night, but a colony that made a final decision. A third theory suggests that the colonists split into smaller groups. Some may have gone south toward Croatoan. Others may have moved inland. Others may have tried to reach the Chesapeake region, the place where they had originally expected to settle. This theory helps explain why the mystery is so difficult. If more than 100 people moved as a single group, they might leave a clearer trail. But if they separated, their traces would be scattered. A few people here, a few families there, a few tools traded, a few names remembered, a few objects buried in the soil. Over time, the boundary between English survivor and native community could become harder to see. Not because nothing happened, but because the evidence blended into everyday life. The most compelling theory is also the simplest. The colonists may have gone to Croatoan. They may have joined, lived with, or been absorbed into the Croatoan community. This would not mean they disappeared into nothing. It would mean they survived by becoming part of another world. For later English writers, that possibility may have been difficult to accept. The legend of a vanished colony was dramatic. A colony swallowed by the wilderness. A mystery carved into a tree. A lost child named Virginia Dare. But survival through integration is a quieter story. It is less ghostly, less theatrical, and perhaps more human. People without food seek food. People without safety seek protection. People without a future move toward those who can offer one. Archaeologists and historians have continued to study possible traces of the colonists. Some evidence has been interpreted as support for the Croatoan or Hatteras theory. Other evidence has pointed inland, but no discovery has settled the matter completely. The problem is not that there are no clues. The problem is that the clues are incomplete. A European object does not always prove a European person lived in that place. It might have been traded, it might have been stolen, it might have been moved. A story passed down generations later may contain memory, myth, or both. History is not a locked room where every clue is clean. It is more like a shoreline after a storm. Some traces remain, others are washed away, and some are buried too deep to see. So, what happened to the Lost Colony of Roanoke? The most likely answer may be that they did not vanish in the way legend suggests. They probably moved. They may have gone to Croatoan. They may have divided into smaller groups. Some may have survived. Some may have died. Some may have been accepted by native communities. Others may have disappeared into the interior. The truth may not be one single dramatic event. It may be a chain of human decisions made under pressure. A colony abandoned by delay, a governor trapped by war, families forced to choose between waiting and leaving, and one word carved into wood for the people who might return: Croatoan. For centuries, that word has been treated like a riddle. But maybe it was never meant to be one. Maybe it was a signpost, a message, a final attempt to be found. John White saw the clue. He understood what it might mean, but he could not follow it. And because he could not follow it, the story became a mystery. The lost colony may not have been lost because no one knew where to look. It may have been lost because history stopped looking too soon. Today, Roanoke remains one of the oldest mysteries in American history, not because there are no answers, but because every answer still leaves shadows. A vanished settlement, a missing child, a carved word, a storm that ended the search, and a question that has survived for more than 400 years. Maybe the lost colony was never truly lost. Maybe it moved. Maybe it survived. Maybe it became part of a story that was never written down. And maybe, somewhere beneath the soil, the final answer is still waiting. This was Vault Insight. If you want more forgotten stories from the darker corners of history, subscribe and open the vault.